Hey there, welcome back to another review, this time of the 1994 science fiction film Stargate. Now, this is a film that I grew up with watching on VHS. It was one of the few handful of movies that I had to watch growing up, and I watched this quite a bit. And I had not seen the film in a long time, so I decided to give this another watch after, revisiting the Mummy franchise and things like the Stephen Sommers films and so on. And because somebody actually mentioned it, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I actually wouldn't. I actually would like to review this, watch it again, and give my thoughts on the film. Now I'm going to say this right up front. I like the film. I think it's a good. I think it's a all right movie. I think it's a solid film. But after watching it again, I have to be honest, I'm not as big of a fan of this film as I was when I was younger. This is one of those movies that revisiting it really put a whole new perspective on the film that's completely different than the one that I expected. I definitely saw a lot more flaws in the film than I did in the past. And it definitely did hurt my enjoyment of the film a little bit. I have to be honest. I thought the film was a bit too slow paced. I thought it was boring at times. And I thought there were a lot of missed opportunities. But there still were a lot of things that I liked about the film, and ultimately I still liked the film despite the problems that I did have with it. But it was bittersweet because as I was watching this again, I was getting this realization that the film that I remember didn't exist. The film that was action packed and thrilling, that had Kurt Russell kicking ass throughout the film and all of that. That film didn't exist. It only existed in my head. And so that was definitely very bittersweet to get that realization that, holy shit, like, this is not nearly as awesome as I remember this film being. That being said, still a good film. Now, Stargate's directed by Roland Emmerich, and the direction here is fine. It's just, I wouldn't say it's a problem. I wouldn't say it's a problem or anything. It just, there isn't a lot to it. It's not particularly impressive. It's just adequate. It's okay. It's your typical just, it's alright type direction. Um, I've seen worse, I've seen better. There's not much to say about the direction because it really doesn't stand out that much. It's written by Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin. It stars Kurt Russell as Colonel Jack O'Neill, James Spader as Dr. Daniel Jackson, Jaye Davidson as Ra, who is the villain of the film. You have Alexis Cruz, who plays Skara, the son of Kasuf and the brother of Shahuri. Mili Avital plays Shahuri, the daughter of Kasuf. Erick Avari plays Kasuf. You have Viveca Lindfors as Dr. Catherine Langford, who is the leader of the Stargate project, who was present when the Stargate was uncovered in the 20s by her father. You might remember her as the daughter of the father in Father's Day, the segment in Creepshow. She's the one who's all like, "You bitch! You called me a bitch!" So it was nice to see her in another film. And there's a few other cast members. You have French Stewart in his acting debut as one of Colonel O'Neill's soldiers who go through the Stargate. You also have a few other actors like John Diehl, who plays Lieutenant Colonel Kowalski, O'Neill's second in command. You also have an early performance by Digimon Hansu, who plays Horus, one of the personal guards of Ra. And it's a fairly it's an alright cast. I would say the main selling points, though, for the cast are Kurt Russell and James Spader. They're top billed, and they're top billed for a reason. They're easily, these two are easily the best actors and the best characters in the film. I personally wish those two had more scenes together. I personally wish they had more to do. I think that's one thing that I thought the film really was missing, was more for these two to be doing, especially Kurt Russell. I mean, I was remembering this movie being full of moments where Kurt Russell was kicking ass, but that's not the case. I was just remembering the one scene where he kicks ass, which is a great scene where he's fighting one of Ra's guards, and he gets in a fist fight with him, and he kicks his ass and delivers one of the best one-liners in film history, in my opinion. I love this one-liner. The one-liner that he delivers, which is, "Give my regards to King Tut, asshole." I love that line. And the film, it just doesn't have a lot of scenes like that for Kurt Russell to do. You have Kurt fucking Russell in your movie, and for a lot of the running time, he's just sitting on his ass. He's just sitting on his ass, doing nothing, trying to bond with these native kids, giving them a lighter, doing whatever. It's very disappointing. Extremely disappointing from that perspective. James Spader has more to do, but he's also disappears for a little bit of the film, and you have Kurt Russell and the military guys trying to find him. And there's a lot of time devoted between this relationship, this love story between James Spader and Shahuri. And the actress is fine, Mili Avital, and she's a beautiful woman, but these two have no chemistry because she doesn't speak English, and therefore this relationship doesn't really have any sparks to it. It's just there, and it just feels like it's padding, and it just makes the film's already slow pace even slower. I just didn't buy this relationship. I didn't buy this love story. I didn't care. And then you have the villain, Jaye Davidson, who plays Ra, and he's fine. He's got the striking look to him. He's androgynous. He's pretty eerie in terms of his appearance. But he doesn't have that much to do either. So you have a villain who doesn't show up until a little bit later in the film, doesn't leave that much of an impact, doesn't really do that much, isn't really that intimidating, doesn't really have a lot of those moments where it's like, oh man, this is a threat. Ra really is a threat to be reckoned with. He's just a bad guy. He's just a token bad guy. He's the screenplay needed a bad guy, and he's the bad guy. That's really all that Ra was for me personally. There wasn't much to this character, to this villain. He electrocutes one guy in the head, and then tries to do that to James Spader later, and then he wants to destroy Earth with with the bomb. That's about it. And he's like some unscrupulous, evil tyrant ruler of this planet and its denizens. But you don't see a lot. You see him attack them and punish them with his flying spacecraft, or in one scene punishes the natives for helping James Spader and Kurt Russell in the military. But that's it, really. Really, that doesn't really leave that much of an impact, to be honest. Now, the screenplay, in my opinion, by Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich, it's got a great concept. I love the idea of the Stargate. I love the first 20 minutes of the film where James Spader is trying to figure out the missing hieroglyph in order to make the Stargate functional so they can use it to go through the Stargate and see whatever there is on whatever it is on the other side. But once they get through the Stargate and what looks like a roller coaster ride, the roller coaster ride through the stars, they just end up in a desert. It's not a very visually appealing setting. It's not a very stunning setting. It's just a desert. There's some pyramids. It just feels kind of small. It feels, no, it doesn't feel kind of small. It feels really small for this grand, epic idea. And I'd be okay with the pyramids and the sand and so forth and so on if the screenplay was tweaked up a bit and had a little bit more going on leading up to its climax, which admittedly, in my opinion, actually is quite thrilling and action-packed. It's just everything else before that is either forgettable or boring. So I really think they should have had, when they go through the Stargate, they get attacked immediately by some of Ra's guards, and there's a little action sequence there. Have some stuff for Kurt Russell to do, maybe some fisticuffs or maybe some gunplay, or maybe both. Then they end up in the desert. I'd cut out the scene with the horse-like thing because that just, it looks like something that George Lucas would put in as one of his special edition versions of the Star Wars films. I never cared for that thing. It really didn't, I didn't even like it as a kid. It was just one of those throwaway scenes. So we cut that out. Spend less time with the natives because we don't understand what the hell they're saying. We don't understand them. It's like if you were just dropped in the middle of a group of people who speak a language you do not understand at all. It's just awkward, and it doesn't feel like there's much of a point to it. I understand it's realistic. I don't care. It's not fun to watch. It's not entertaining to be stuck watching these natives on this planet who can't speak English. I don't know what they're saying. I don't know what they're talking about. I also can't relate to them at all. That's why you need to have more scenes with Kurt Russell and James Spader. Maybe focus on those two. Have them build a bond with one another. Have them kick ass together. Something. Because there's like some soldiers who get attacked by some of Ra's guards, like what, 45 minutes into the movie? And then things start to get interesting? It just takes too long to really get going. And by the time it does, it just leaves you wanting more. So I would definitely put at least 2 more action sequences into the film. One in the middle, one before the climax. I'd tighten up the pacing, because I think that's a problem, because once they go through the Stargate, it becomes Slowgate. Because it's just a very slow-paced movie. It's like you're meandering around in the desert looking for water. That's what the experience is like, watching Stargate once they go through the Stargate. It is. It's like you're just wandering through the desert, looking for that salvation, looking for the water, looking for something to eat, looking for an oasis of some kind, and all you have is fucking sand. So, yeah, I mean, the story, there's a good concept there. I just think there needed to be some tweaks in order to really make it live up to its full potential. But there are other things about the film, though, that are just spectacular by themselves. The visual effects, for one, I thought were very impressive for the $55 million budget. I love the production and art design. I think it has some absolutely gorgeous bits of architecture and model work and so on. I love the look of Ra's guards. I like the concept of how the Egyptian gods, which you see on all these different ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs and so on, and you see all these different ancient Egyptian gods on the walls and these old pyramids and tombs. I love the idea that they could have been human, but they had like these helmets that look like Anubis or the head of Anubis or the head of Horus. That was a really cool idea, and the effect on those looked really great. I like this flying spacecraft that they use. I like the look of Ra. I like the pyramid that changes. It looks like a normal pyramid, and then at night it becomes something else entirely. It becomes more like a spaceship. I love that. I also love absolutely adore the score by David Arnold. It's one of my all-time favorite scores. I love this score to death. If there's anything about this film that still holds up and will always hold up, that is the score by David Arnold. And what's so amazing about the score by David Arnold is that this is a guy who was working at a record store, apparently, when Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich got him on board to do the score. And that's what makes this score even more impressive, because this is a guy who was just working at a record store, and now he's he's composing an unbelievably epic, spectacular, stunning score for the film. And like I said, I like Kurt Russell, I like James Spader. But really, out of all the cast, I mean, except for maybe French Stewart, who I actually didn't mind, I thought he was actually a decent character in the film. I didn't really care about anybody else. I didn't care about the natives and the whole thing with the younger kid and then the other, what was it, like a little person or something. I didn't care about that. I didn't care about any of the stuff with the natives. I could care less. It just didn't register with me. I did not give a shit. And apparently there's a director's cut of the film, which is what this has, the director's cut and the theatrical cut. I watched the theatrical cut because the director's cut, to me, it just makes the film even longer and even more slow-paced. It's already long enough, and I think it's too long anyway. It's 121 minutes. I think it should have been 90 minutes, a faster pace, more action, and you could still have the same amount of intrigue, but I just think a faster pace would have helped the film considerably. And the director's cut tacks on 9 minutes that really don't need to be there. There's a little bit in the prologue where the archaeological dig is happening, where they discover the Stargate, and they find some petrified statues of, Horus and Anubis or whatever. Not necessary. Didn't need to be there. There's a line of dialogue that's changed that doesn't really add that much. Something that Colonel Jack O'Neill says, Kurt Russell's character. And then there's something that's added which really bothers me that would have hurt the film considerably. And that is, in the director's cut, they add this thing where it completely explains that the mission that Kurt Russell's character is on is a suicide mission early on in the film. So then all of the intrigue, all of the ambiguity that's going on with his character throughout a large majority of the film would be completely pointless if this scene was included in the theatrical cut. I'm so glad that scene was cut out, because it adds nothing to the film, and it honestly takes away from one of the very few things that actually was interesting or intriguing about these moments when Kurt Russell is just sitting on his ass. Because it's the whole, what's his motivations? What is he doing here? It works so much better when you find out what his purpose is and what he's planning on doing around the same time as the people who are there with him in the film. I hate it when films do this, where they explain shit like this early on to the audience, and then they dick around and then have everyone else in the film try to catch up with the audience. I hate it. I hate that. I absolutely fucking hate that shit. So I'm glad that was not present in the theatrical cut. So I'm glad that was cut out. There's another little thing that shows Ra and how his alien body ended up going into a human host. That's one of the few things that I might have put back in the film, but I could take or leave it. So overall, the director's cut to me isn't anything that's really that much or anything that's considerably better than the theatrical cut, in my personal opinion. So the film was actually a considerable hit when it came out. It had, like I said, it was made on a budget of $55 million. It came out in October of 1994, and it made $196.6 million worldwide, which is a pretty considerable profit. Now, this is an MGM Carlico production, and they weren't expecting it to make that much. In fact, there was a disastrous test screening where they didn't have any subtitles for Ra's character. So, only 30 people who were above the age of 30 or around the age of 30 liked the film. So they added the subtitles later, and the screening was better. And the film did well. It was a surprise hit. Now, critically, though, it wasn't nearly as successful as it was with the audiences. And after watching it again, I could see why. Although, I don't hate the film like Roger Ebert does. Roger Ebert absolutely abhorred Stargate. He gave it 1 out of 4 stars. He said that Stargate is the type of film that Ed Wood prepared you for. You know, it's like, you know, the film Ed Wood with Tim Burton. And this is what he said. I want to get this just right. He said, the movie Ed Wood, about the worst director of all time, was made to prepare us for Stargate. He gave it 1 out of 4 stars, and even over 10 years later, it remained on his list of most hated films. I don't think it's that bad, but, you know, I can see why critics were mixed on this. I really can, after watching it again, after all these years. Now, there's there's not a lot of interesting trivia I found. There's some nice little making of documentaries and stuff on this DVD as well, on the 15th anniversary Blu-ray, which I'd like to get someday, because it has more features and stuff on it. James Spader himself, he admitted that he did the film for money. He found the script to be awful. He said, acting for me is a passion, but it's also a job, and I've always approached it as such. I have a certain manual laborious view of acting. There's no shame in taking a film because you need some fucking money. I love that quote. I think it's a great quote. Now, Jaye Davidson, he was leery of taking the film because of the attention that he got after doing The Crying Game, so he's reluctant to be in the movie. But he didn't want to turn the offer down, so he made what he thought was going to be an unacceptable demand of $1 million. But the demand was accepted and he appeared in the film. This is also his last film, though, because he found the costumes in the film so uncomfortable to wear that when he heard the final cut, you know, when he heard somebody go cut for the final time, he completely stripped naked and went back to his trailer. And ever since, he has not acted in a single film, except for like a little short thing, a little short movie called The Borghild Project, because he retired from acting soon after. Also, apparently this film was the first movie to ever really have an official website. Dean Devlin himself ran it and put pictures and audio clips and stuff on it back in 1994. But other than that, I don't really have a lot of extra trivia to really tell you guys. But I thought those were a little bit interesting, and I wanted to share those with you. But overall, Stargate, I would have to say, is, like I said, it's a solid film. It's an alright movie. I don't love it as much as I used to. I would have to say, I do feel it's a little bit underrated because most people tend to forget about this film. They don't talk about it that much. More people tend to talk about the TV series than the film. And I do think it's worth a watch. I think it's worth a watch. I think it's worth checking out if you haven't seen it, especially if you find the idea interesting. And I really don't know what else to say about the film except if I was going to rate it out of 5 stars. I would give Stargate 3.5 out of 5 stars. It's above average film. I like it. I'm glad I have it in my collection. I'd like to get the Blu-ray someday. But it was admittedly a bit disappointing because, yeah, it just wasn't as good as I remember it being. But it was still a pretty good movie in its own right. Anyway, thanks for watching my review. And as always, I will see you guys later. See ya.